All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 6th of May, 2026, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can basically be summarized as please treat each other as you would expect to be treated, or in other words, please be excellent to each other. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand and I will call it. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to break one of our rules and welcome new attendees to say hi. So don't feel like you need to raise your hand. If you would like to introduce yourself to the group, please go ahead, unmute and say hi.
Hello everyone. Hello everyone.
You're a little bit quiet, Aditya.
Hello everyone.
Much better.
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
I am Aditya Mishra and I have been contributing to Docker's Mobi project, but now I am a little bit interested to contribute here also. I hope I'll do something and don't mess up anything also.
Welcome aboard, Aditya. I'm sure this is a good place to learn, and yeah, I'm sure you'll do great.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Anyone else want to say hi? Okay, we will move on to our open proposal readouts. Do we have anybody who wants to talk about any of our open proposals? Independent worker topology or the external CA? I don't know if we have anybody here to talk about either one.
I'm here, but not much of an update. We're trying to get that first MR in, but Cody's mostly working on that, and he's on call this week, and it seems like it's pretty busy.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the update. Okay, so we will move into our discussion topics, of which I put one up. This came up in discussion earlier, and I was hoping to bend the ear of some folks here, probably most likely Fabrizio and Stefan, as Nolan had kind of pointed me towards a discussion that was happening, or maybe it was Damiano, who pointed me towards a discussion that was happening about upgrading to the V1 Beta 2 contract, and is that considered a breaking change to status and everything? And I think I'm talking about this in the relationship of the cluster API kubemark provider. So and I don't know if I have it open or not. So like I wanted to do a new release of cluster API kubemark, and as part of that release, I was going to update the contract to V1 Beta 2 for the next minor version that we're coming out with. And Damiano had kind of asked me a question, about that. That was it, was this like, why change this? And recently I upgraded CapK to kind of follow the V1 Beta 2 contract guidelines, and Damiano, I think, was pointing me towards a discussion that was saying like, oh, that's probably considered a breaking API change. So I wanted to come back here and kind of get some clarity on that. And also in relation to the kubemark provider, because like this is like a testing provider, so I don't, should I be revving kubemark's API to add these new status changes? Does anybody have like thoughts on that? I can't see whose hand up, but please, Stefan, please.
Yeah, my hand is up. I think it really highly depends on like your user base, I guess. So if you go strictly by the guidelines, changing the type of a field in that way is definitely a breaking change. I do not know if that's acceptable or not in kubemark. In CapD, we did a new API version, but in CapD, the situation I think is very special because we are literally using CapD to ensure that core copy behaves correctly. So we want CapD to be as close as possible to a real info provider. So we want an API version with the beta 1 contract. We want an API version with beta 2 contract. If you would not have had that use case and you say like, oh, CapD is only for internal testing and nobody should care, I think then, we can just do whatever we want. But our use case for CapD is different. What I don't know about KubeMark is basically, will you use the complaint, right? If they, I don't know, if they build something on top of KubeMark, they use the old structs. Now you change your structs, the structs are changing. When they bomb KubeMark, they maybe have to change their code as well. Will someone complain, or is it okay? It's just I can't answer that, right? But if you go by the Kubernetes guidelines, that's definitely a breaking change, no question.
Okay, I guess like yeah, for KubeMark, like I think I'm one of the only people building stuff on top of it. I know a couple colleagues are using it, but they're not building on top of it. And I don't think, we don't do any sort of like upgrade testing or downgrade testing with those objects. So like it felt safe to me. And then furthermore, when I was looking at the conversion in the code from like the cluster API condition type to the meta V1 condition type, it looked like they both serialized very similarly on the on the wire, so that I could actually use the old condition type and just put the new condition information into it, and it would still serialize. Okay. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely largely still the same thing. But if you ask me something like, you have your old version of KubeMark with the old structs, and you have an object in etcd, and now you're coming along with the new CRD where the stuff looks different. Will everything still work when you bump to the new KubeMark version? I don't know.
right. Yeah, totally.
Right? Because maybe it hits an issue if it finds some fields in etcd, like the severity. Severity does not exist in the new condition, in the upstream condition type. So I don't know what the whole thing will do if it finds a severity field. Maybe it will be just ignored. But if that's just not like a really supported use case and people are just deploying it for scratch in some temporary test classes, etc., then I would not worry about any of that, right?
Right. Like that, and that's mostly what I mean. I haven't heard of anyone using CapK for anything but like testing autoscalers and stuff like that. So we're not doing any sort of like I just want the cluster API controllers to recognize that this is using V1 beta 2 and just treat it like normal. Like that's mostly what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So if I may add, so definitely KPBK is a test provider, is not running any real workload. And I think no one is running a long-lived cluster with KPK. That simply does not make sense. So uh, this gives you some room. Basically, you don't have to have a new API. You don't have to deprecate all the go through 1 year or whatever, managing two APIs, etc., etc. What I will do is just change the current API, drop the fields that are not in the contract anymore, add the new one, change the types that we changed, and go on. It is basically, it is a test provider. It is, if you look at this from another angle, it is important, but it is all toil on us to maintain this stuff. Go for the easiest path for you.
Yeah, I think that's definitely okay. And in CapD, if you would not have the test use case and you would have just done it, and someone comes along and says like, "Hey, I have a long-running CapD class and I upgrade CapD and I hit issues," then I would just point to the documentation where you wrote, "This is just for end-to-end test purposes." Sorry.
Right. I feel like I feel much better now, like having had this conversation, and like I think I pretty much like intuitively did what Fabrizio was talking about, because I was like, I mean, I probably have the longest lived CapK cluster, and that's only because like it's in my test infrastructure and I forgot to delete it, but
Yes.
but I'm not revving it or anything like that. So yeah, okay. This helps. I won't be so I won't be I don't feel so bad about breaking people who have long-lived CapK cluster.
Just a note, you have a question about condition and serialization. So
Yeah.
basically, we tried, since we know that changing condition and is a little bit more work, because there is not only condition, but also there are condition util, patch helper, etc., etc. So we tried to make it possible to leverage the serialization format as a way to give room to folks to choose their own what they want to do. So basically, in cluster API, we leverage the serialization format. We convert. If you have severity on your provider, we just ignore it, and we keep the condition with status message and the other info. This in theory allow a provider to keep using V1 cluster API V1 beta condition like forever. But there is a caveat on this. We are going to drop from cluster API those utils. So if you want to keep using cluster API condition util, etc., you can do it, but you have to fork the util in your repository. And it is documented in the migration guide. So yeah, we give you some transition type. We give you some room to do this transition, but at a certain point, Capi will have to move on. And if you want to keep using old code, you have to take ownership of it, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like we weren't even using severity anyway. So like for KubeMark, it didn't matter really.
For KubeMark, my suggestion is move to the latest. That's it.
Okay. That's good advice. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. And then someday I'll open a PR up on the cluster API repo to contribute.
Yeah.
So that's my dream at least.
Just one question. CapK is an infra provider, right? So there were also other changes like, I mean, I don't know which of the contracts to implement, but I guess you looked at the documentation, right? And you're aware of like the other parts of the contract we changed. And
Yeah.
that was just the most visible one. That's why you want to talk about this one or something.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like, so I was doing a bump like I was trying to get us to CAPI 1.11 recently. And I think that like when it came to like the main contract that we were implementing is like the infrastructure machine contract, right? So like those seem to be the main things I needed to update was was adding like the initialization status to the KubeMark machine, and then changing the way we updated. I think changing the way that we updated the status conditions, just making sure that like here, like I was still even using the old, cluster V1 beta 1, but it seemed like I just needed to update like the condition types and whatnot, and then it was working. So
I just sent you a link in chat. Just open that for a second.
okay.
Then I'll say a sentence and I think then we're good.
All right, yeah, let me get chat open here. Okay. Yeah, copy. And yes, like as always, the documentation about these contract rules has been like invaluable. So like kudos to everyone involved in that process.
Okay, so I infer from that basically you looked over the list for infra-class, infra-machine and figured out which ones you need, etc. Yeah, then you're perfectly fine.
Right, but like, yeah, we're not like I don't think we have a KubeMark cluster type that we promote or anything. Like the main type we have is just an infra machine type. So
you don't have an infra-class?
No, yeah, like there's not even an infra
okay.
cluster. So,
yeah, it's just okay. Oh, good.
Like we get a default cluster object, but we don't have a KubeMark cluster object that we need.
So when you create a cluster, you just don't specify an infra cluster.
Right.
They use CapD.
Right. Yeah. CapD.
I use CapD. Okay. I didn't remember.
Because CapD, we need CapD for our control plane, and then like our the workload plane is ultimately where the CapK nodes are. Because like the CapK nodes can't really run anything; they just say they're running stuff.
Then while we're talking about the topic, if you are using Docker cluster as a CRD, then you should sooner or later migrate to dev cluster before we are deleting Docker cluster, just for awareness.
That's a good note, though. Yeah, that's a good call. I need to get into that.
I mean, if you're on 1.11, then you still have some, right? I mean, it's still there on 1.13, so you have some time.
So I guess
we're not sure when we're going to get rid of it. So maybe if I would guess 1.14, 15, 16. But
is it safe then to make this move to the V1 beta 2 contract in the metadata? Like, I mean, it's only going to matter for cluster CPI.
Yeah. This should be unrelated to what I said about dev cluster.
Okay.
This should only be about basically which contract your CRDs are implementing.
Okay.
So like your kubemark machine. If
Right.
that's beta 2, then it's correct to change it to beta 2.
Okay. All right, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, appreciate the advice and the consultation. Does anybody else have questions or comments about this before we move on to Daniel's topic? Okay. Thanks again, Stefan and Fabrizio. I really appreciate it. Daniel, I'll hand it over to you with a question about KCP behavior.
Thanks. Yeah, this is KCP's a Kubernetes control plane provider. This is kind of in the context of that discussion that we were having about the Kubernetes init and using the control plane endpoint being a load balancer, et cetera, et cetera. So Kubernetes was there's a change that's happening where it's going to use the local API endpoint, which is great, and that's going to allow the first control plane to come up. And I thought, I guess looking at the KCP code, that once that happens, once the first control plane machine comes up, then at the sort of subsequent reconcile before KCP creates the second control plane machine, that it performs a health check. And I thought that this health check is done using the remote cluster client, which uses the control plane endpoint. And that control plane endpoint, of course, would be available once the load balancer is up to date and everything. And so then KCP, I assumed, right, based on this understanding, that KCP would sort of, if that load balancer is not available yet, it's not sending the request through, whatever reason, KCP would just say, okay, well, I can't, this health check is failing, and then I'll requeue and reconcile again, and eventually that would pass. I just wanted to, I guess, see is that understanding correct or not about the behavior of KCP in this situation?
Fabrizio, do you want to answer, or should I give it a shot?
So
I
the
can, but
understand
you
is
probably remember more than I do.
yeah, yes. So your answer. So your understanding is correct. KCP is checking before doing any operation. Basically, requires that the control plane has a certain level of healthiness, and for scaling up, it should be fully healthy. Okay, how health is determined? Health is determined by basically by looking at the condition, on the KCP condition, and the condition on machine that reports etcd member LT, API server LT, etc., etc. Those conditions, in order to get these conditions, KCP connect to the remote API server. So your understanding is correct.
Okay, thanks for confirming. Yeah, I got what seemed like a conflicting report from Damiano. So yeah, I just wanted to get a sanity check, so to speak. But okay, that does make sense. So I'll talk with him again and see if we can figure that out. Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Yeah, if you have an issue with more detail, happy to take a look.
I think
Yeah, not yet, but yeah, well, I'll ask him, and I'll just make sure that we're on the same page. And if there's something, then yeah, we'll try to get something reproducible.
Yeah, probably already looked at that code, but I just linked here in the agenda. A link to the code that does the pre-flight check. I mean, we call it pre-flight check in that context. and that looks at a bunch of stuff. And somewhere down there is like check healthiness, and check healthiness is looking through all the conditions that Fabrizio mentioned. So line 253.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, who knows, right? I mean, if you have the full data of the first machine with all the conditions and everything, and you compare it against that code path, I mean,
Yeah, just
maybe
a note.
there's a way, I don't know, depending on what exactly the situation is.
Just a note. We changed this code so the fact that we are checking condition and condition are read by connecting with the cluster is still correct, but the code that we are looking at was changed in 1.13 in order to make KCP more tolerant to, a TDC member not joining, label not being applied. So the error that we saw in kubadmin more frequently than in the past. So if you are looking, if you are investigating main, that's okay. If you are investigating another release, this code, let me say, it is different in older release, but the underlying concept still apply.
Okay. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments on that topic, I'll open the floor up here. We're at the end of our agenda and there's no provider updates or feature group updates. Does anybody have an ad hoc topic they would like to bring up before we go? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we'll take back about 35 minutes of our day here. Thanks everybody for coming out, and we'll see you next time.